I am Mia Reynolds, and this is the story of the day the HOA Karen canceled my wedding reception just to hide the fact that she had stolen the future of our entire neighborhood. If you're watching right now, look at the screen. I'm holding up my phone. That screenshot right there, the one with the contact name President Hargrove at the top, that is Exhibit A. Read the text bubble. It says, "The HOA board will not approve this spectacle." 6 words. That was all it took. In a single message, she deleted my reception, erased my immediate future, and killed the version of me that had spent 32 years trying to be the perfect resident. I replied with exactly one word: understood. They thought that was surrender. They thought understood meant I was retreating to my kitchen to cry into my coffee like I did when they fined me for the wrong shade of mulch 2 years ago. They did not know it was a declaration of war. Before I tell you everything, I need to know you're actually here with me. The algorithm buries stories like this because they are ugly and people prefer pretty lies about friendly neighbors. So please go down to the comments right now and just type, "Hi," or tell me which state you're watching from. If you believe no one deserves to be silenced by the very people who are supposed to protect your property values, hit that subscribe button. This story is not going to be beautiful. It is not going to be one of those heartwarming HOA reconciliation videos. But I promise you one thing, it is real. Let me set the scene for you. I am sitting here in my modest 3-bedroom in Oakwood Grove, the kind of planned community that looks like a postcard from the outside. It is quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that rings in your ears after a bomb has gone off. But before the dust settles, spread out on the kitchen island in front of me is a pile of heavy cream-colored envelopes. Those are the reception invitations. We had not even mailed them all yet. They sit there like a stack of bricks weighing down the granite. And right next to them, resting on the bare wood, is my engagement ring. I took it off 5 minutes ago. My finger still feels light, almost naked, where the band used to sit. I did not take it off because I stopped loving the man who gave it to me. I took it off because wearing it right now feels like a lie. It feels like pretending I am still the same woman I was yesterday morning. And I am not. That woman is dead. She died the moment Vivian Hargrove looked at me with eyes as cold as polished marble and decided my happiness was an expense she was no longer willing to justify. You might be wondering who these people are to the outside world. The Hargrove family is the picture of suburban perfection. Vivian Hargrove, our HOA president for 8 straight years, is a self-proclaimed community leader. She has written 3 self-published pamphlets on harmonious living and goes on local news segments telling everyone how to raise respectful neighbors. She preaches rules and respect. She built a reputation and a small fortune in hidden bonuses on the idea of being fair. But the irony is she could not survive one resident choosing a life that did not fit her brand. Her husband Charles and her daughter Brooke. They were there too in that Zoom call when the sentence was handed down. They stood there like a Greek chorus of cowardice. They stood on the side of reason. That is what they called it. They said they were being pragmatic. They said they were protecting property values. To them, I was the one standing on the side of madness because to people like them, freedom looks like chaos. I want to talk about that moment. I said, understood. When I said it, I felt numb. My hands were shaking. Not visibly, but that internal vibration that makes you feel like your bones are turning to powder. My tongue felt thick. I thought I was saying it just to make the noise stop. I thought I was saying it to end the call so I could get out of that suffocating Zoom before I collapsed. But looking back at it now, sitting here in this half-light, I realized that understood was not capitulation. It was a command code. It was the moment my operating system rebooted. It was the moment I stopped being Mia, the compliant homeowner who wanted to please and started being Mia, the woman who wanted answers. Let me give you the context just so we are clear on who is telling you this story. I am 32 years old. I am not a new buyer begging for leniency. I work as a financial analyst for mid-sized property groups. I spend my days looking at spreadsheets, analyzing reserve funds, and telling strangers how to manage their budgets. I am good at it. I am rational. I am organized. My fiancé is Alex Lane. He is a software engineer, the kind of guy who builds things from code and logic. He is climbing the ladder, doing well, brilliant and steady. We are not destitute. We are not asking for charity. We were not asking the HOA to pay for the reception because we could not afford catering. We were accepting their preliminary approval because it is tradition in this neighborhood, because they insisted every large gathering needed board sign-off, because it was supposed to be a celebration of two families joining together. Or so I thought. I need you to stay with me until the end of this video. I know the internet has a short attention span, and you probably have a dozen other notifications popping up right now, but you need to hear this because it was only at the very end, after the shock wore off, after I logged off that perfect Zoom call, that I realized the truth. Vivian Hargrove did not cancel my reception because she disliked Alex. She actually pretended to like him for years. She did not cancel it because the backyard was too small or the string lights were the wrong shade of warm white. She did not cancel it because she thought I was too young or too immature. She canceled it because of a number. She canceled it because getting married and hosting a major event triggers a legal process she thought she could avoid forever. She canceled it to hide a sum of money that is worth more than their dignity, more than their reputation, and certainly more than their community standards. I mentioned a spectacle earlier. That was her word, but I am going to reclaim it. The HOA board will not approve this spectacle, she said. For my entire 8 years in Oakwood Grove, I have been the well-trained performer in the Hargrove HOA circus. I jumped through the hoops. I balanced on the tightrope of their ridiculous rules. I smiled when the board applauded, and I stayed silent when the president snapped the whip. I painted my shutters the exact approved beige. I performed the tricks they taught me. I thought that if I followed every rule perfectly, eventually they would let me live in peace. But that is not how an HOA circus works. The show must go on. And the residents are just assets. Yesterday, I stepped out of the ring. I took off the costume and instead of walking away, I went to the lighting booth and I turned the spotlights around. I am pointing them directly at the president's box where Vivian Hargrove is sitting. You think you know HOA drama? You think you know neighborhood Karens? You have no idea. 3 weeks after Vivian Hargrove canceled my reception, the phone in my house started ringing and then my cell phone and then Alex's phone. It was not just neighbors. It was lawyers. It was bank representatives. It was people I had not spoken to in years. The phone lines were burning up. Not because they missed me. Not because they were sorry. Not because they wanted to reconcile. They were calling because the immaculate, polished, perfect empire named Oakwood Grove HOA had started to crack from the inside out. And they knew deep down that the person holding the sledgehammer was the quiet homeowner who had finally had enough. They broke my heart to save their bank accounts. But in doing so, they handed me the weapon I needed to dismantle them. I am looking at the lens of this camera right now and I am imagining Vivian Hargrove watching this. I know she will. She monitors her public image with the obsession of a hawk circling a field mouse. She is probably sitting in her perfectly staged living room surrounded by her HOA awards and her laminated rulebooks, sipping her herbal tea, waiting for me to apologize. She is waiting for me to take this video down. She is waiting for the compliant Mia to come back. She is going to be waiting a long time because the Mia she knows is gone. The Mia she knows died the second she called my love for Alex a spectacle. To understand how we got here, to understand why an HOA president would sabotage one resident's happiness with such clinical precision, we have to go back. We cannot start with the lawsuits or the forensic accountants. We cannot start with the victory. We have to start with the wound. We have to go back to that Tuesday afternoon on the Zoom call. It was a Tuesday. The sky outside my window was that bruised purple color you get before a summer storm. I logged in thinking we were going to discuss table settings and string light wattage. I thought we were going to argue about whether to have chicken or fish. Vivian Hargrove thought she was just canceling a party. She thought she was cutting a line item from the budget. She thought she was managing a crisis. She had no idea that she was signing the death warrant for her own reputation. So grab a drink, settle in, because I am about to tell you exactly what happens when you push the quiet homeowner too far. This is not just a story about a canceled reception. This is a story about what happens when the HOA ATM machine fights back. This is a story about the price of freedom. And let me tell you, the tax on it is steep, but I was finally willing to pay it. Let's go back to that Zoom call. It started with a vibration in my pocket. I was at my desk staring at a spreadsheet filled with third-quarter projections for a mid-sized property group. My phone buzzed against my hip. I pulled it out, expecting a confirmation from the caterer or maybe a text from Alex asking what I wanted for dinner. Instead, it was a message from Vivian Hargrove. Emergency board meeting your event. Join now. There was no greeting. There was no sign-off. There was no question mark. It was a summon. It was polite, grammatically correct, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the digital equivalent of a subpoena. I remember staring at the screen, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to tell myself it was just a final planning session. Maybe she wanted to go over the parking plan again. Maybe she had found a better supplier for the portable toilets. Vivian was a perfectionist. After all, a sudden meeting to discuss napkin folds was not entirely out of character. But deep down, beneath the layer of rationalization I had built over 8 years, I knew better. The tone was too sterile. It felt like being called to the principal's office, or worse, to a performance review where the paperwork for termination had already been printed. I logged in with the camera off. The meeting screen filled with the usual suspects. Vivian Hargrove sat centered, wearing her signature navy blazer with the embroidered HOA logo. Her posture impeccable, her chin raised slightly. A single strand of pearls rested against her collarbone, catching the light from her ring light. She looked like a statue carved from ice and judgment. She looked like the expert she claimed to be, the woman who wrote pamphlets on harmonious living while running her own neighborhood like a military operation. There were no pleasantries. No one asked how my day was. I stayed muted until she unmuted me without asking. Mia, we have reviewed your request for the backyard reception. She began, voice smooth as silk. The board will not approve this spectacle. Effective immediately. I blinked. The words hung in the digital air. The reception? I clarified as if I were a slow child. We are pulling approval. The event cannot proceed. But I stammered, my brain trying to catch up with the sudden shift in reality. The invitations, the deposits, the caterer is fully booked. The reception is in 2 months. Cancel it, she said. She waved her hand dismissively, a gesture that erased 2 years of planning in a second. Why? I asked. My voice cracked. Is it the guest count? The parking? I looked at the tiny squares of the other board members. They would not meet my eyes. They looked at their keyboards, then at Vivian, then back at their screens. Charles Hargrove cleared his throat. A weak rattling sound, but said nothing. This is not about logistics, Mia, Vivian said, her voice sharpening. This is about standards. It is about the Oakwood Grove brand. We have indulged this fantasy long enough. We thought you would come to your senses. We thought you would realize that Alex Lane is simply not adequate for this community. He has no pedigree. He has no ambition beyond a paycheck. He is perfectly fine for a quiet backyard barbecue, Mia. But he is not reception material. Not for this neighborhood. She began to pace in her chair, her ring light casting harsh shadows. And frankly, you are not ready. Look at you. You are frantic. You are emotional. You are trying to force this event because you think it will fix you. You are not stable enough to host a gathering of this size, and I will not allow hundreds of cars and strangers to damage the brand I have spent 8 years building. People look to Oakwood Grove for excellence. This, she gestured vaguely at the screen between us, is a mess, and we are not approving this spectacle. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Felt like a trapped bird. I am not unstable. I have followed every rule. I have paid every fee on time. You have a house, she corrected. A mid-level house. And this reception. It is becoming a spectacle. It is tacky. It is desperate. It is going to damage the brand I have spent years building. My sister-in-law equivalent Brooke finally looked up from her phone in her little square. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and smirked. Honestly, Mia, it is for the best. The color scheme was a little tragedy anyway. Better luck next time. She said it with a little lilt in her voice, like she was consoling someone who had lost a round of minigolf. Not their entire future. Better luck next time, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I looked at Charles again. Sir, he flinched. For a second I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes. He opened his mouth and I thought, here it is. He is going to step in. He is going to be reasonable. Listen to the president. Mia, he mumbled. She knows best. That was it. That was the betrayal. It was not the rules. It was the absolute abandonment. He was not a board member. He was a piece of furniture in Vivian's HOA dollhouse. I stood there in my own kitchen feeling the blood drain from my face. My hands were freezing cold, yet I could feel sweat trickling down my back. My mind went blank. For 8 years I had a script for moments like this. The script said, cry, beg, apologize, promise to be better, promise to change whatever they want changed. Please just approve me. I could feel the tears pricking the back of my eyes, ready to follow the script. And then something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of a tether breaking in deep space. I looked at Vivian. I looked at her perfect hair, her cold eyes, the pearls that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. I looked at the woman who claimed to be an expert on community harmony and realized she did not know the first thing about it. I took a deep breath. I pulled my shoulders back. I let the script fall to the floor and incinerate. Understood, I said. My voice was steady. Surprised me. Vivian blinked. She had been expecting the tears. She had been primed for the argument, ready to dissect my emotions and use them against me. She did not know what to do with understood. Good, she said, recovering quickly. I am glad you are finally seeing reason. We can release a statement saying it was a mutual decision to postpone due to personal growth. Understood, I said again. But in my head, the word meant something entirely different. Understood. That meant I saw them. I really saw them. Understood. That meant this was no longer my peaceful neighborhood. This was a crime scene, and I was the witness. I clicked leave meeting. As the screen went black, my eyes swept across the open tab on my second monitor. There was a PDF sitting there. It was cream-colored, heavy stock. On the tab, written in Vivian's elegant, distinctive cursive was my name, Mia Reynolds. The document was slightly open. I paused just for a second. My eyes focused on the line protruding from the bottom. It was a printed form. I could read the header clearly. Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund Review Cancellation Form. And below that, a date stamp. My heart stopped. The date stamp was from 3 weeks ago. This was not a conversation. This was not a decision they had come to this afternoon after agonizing over the guest list. This was a premeditated execution. They had canceled the approval nearly a month ago. They had let me continue planning. Let me continue dreaming. Let me continue writing checks for deposits I would never get back. All while holding the kill switch in their hands. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I looked at the tiny square where Brooke had been. She was typing furiously on her phone now, her thumbs flying across the glass. I took a small step to the side, just enough to catch the angle of her screen in the reflection. I saw the text bubble. Approved. She is taking it better than expected. No tears yet. I looked away before anyone could catch me. So the vendors knew, Brooke knew, Vivian knew, everyone knew my reception was dead except for the bride. They had been managing me. They had been coordinating the demolition of my happiness behind my back. Probably in a group chat I was not a part of. I felt a strange sensation then. It was not sadness anymore. It was clarity. It was the kind of crystalline focus you get right before a car accident. I did not scream. I did not throw my laptop at the wall. I did not call Vivian and demand an explanation. I just closed the laptop. Goodbye, President Hargrove. I whispered to the empty room. Goodbye, Charles. Goodbye, Brooke. I could not bring myself to call them neighbors anymore. I stepped away from the desk. The air in my kitchen was just as still, but it felt different now. It felt like the air in a tunnel leading out of a prison. I reached for my car keys. Mia. Charles's voice floated out from the speaker before I fully logged off. It was weak, barely a whisper. I paused, my hand on the mouse. I looked back at the frozen screen. Charles was still staring at his keyboard. His shoulders shook. Just once, a small violent tremor. I waited for a heartbeat. I thought he might unmute. I thought he might run interference. I thought he might finally be the reasonable board member I needed him to be. But he didn't. He just sat there staring at his screen, keeping his perfect polo unrumpled, keeping his silence. I closed the laptop completely. The sound of the lid clicking into place was loud. It sounded like a gunshot. It sounded like a judge banging a gavel. It sounded like the final lock turning on a vault. I drove to the community center that evening with the radio off. The HOA office sits at the very end of a long, winding road lined with identical oak trees. As I approached, the building loomed into view like a monument to unattainable standards. It is a small colonial revival, painted a white so bright it hurts your eyes in the afternoon sun. The shutters are a glossy, perfect black. The hedges are trimmed with such geometric precision they look fake. The lawn is a seamless carpet of green that never dares to grow a weed. It is a beautiful building. It has been featured in the local paper, but to me, it has always looked like a museum where touching the exhibits is strictly prohibited. It is a building that cares more about how it photographs than how it feels to live inside the rules it enforces. I parked my modest sedan next to Vivian's gleaming luxury SUV and Brooke's pristine convertible. The silence when I stepped out of the car was heavy. It was not the peaceful silence of nature. It was the oppressive silence of a place where chaos is not allowed to exist. I walked up the front steps, my heels clicking loudly on the stone. I used my keycard to open the heavy glass door, but it felt like I was breaking in. The air inside was conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees. It smelled of lemon oil, fresh lilies, and old money. I found the file room. This is a room we rarely used. It was reserved for official records, for inspections, for interviews. It was a stage and the actors were already in position. My hands were still shaking as I pulled open the drawer labeled Reserve Fund, 2018 present. I told myself I was there to retrieve some reception paperwork I had left in the shared folder. That was the lie I told the security camera when I swiped in. But as I walked into the temperature-controlled room, I knew that was not the real reason. I was not there to pack. I was there to investigate. The silence of the file room hit me differently than it had yesterday. Yesterday it had felt oppressive. Today it felt expectant. It felt like the room was holding its breath, waiting to see if I was smart enough to look in the right folders. I did not go to the reception file. Instead, I walked straight to the locked cabinet under the main counter. It was a small, cramped space, hidden behind a panel that looked like part of the wood paneling. When I was a newer resident, this had been my sanctuary during late-night board meetings. It smelled of cedar and old dust, and the faint metallic tang of the key safe that the treasurer stored there. But behind the boxes of old minutes, there was a small hollow space where a frustrated homeowner could curl up and disappear. I pulled the drawer open. The hinges whined, a sound I had not heard in over a year. I pushed aside a heavy binder that smelled like mothballs and knelt down on the tile floor. It was exactly where I had left it, tucked into the corner, wedged between the wall and a box of old Christmas party photos, was a faded green binder. My heart gave a strange, painful lurch. I reached out and pulled it free. The cover was faded, the edges soft and curling from years of being handled by nervous, sweaty hands. I ran my thumb over the textured paper. This binder was the repository of the Mia I had been before they edited me. I sat down right there on the floor of the file room, cross-legged, and opened it. The pages were filled with printed emails and handwritten notes. They were records of reserve fund meetings, but they were not the sanitized versions posted online. They were strange, whimsical things full of red flags I had ignored. I remembered the day I stopped questioning them. I was 28. I had shown this binder to Vivian during a welcome meeting, trembling with pride, telling her I wanted to help with financial transparency. I wanted to build trust. I wanted to create spaces where people could feel safe, not just impressed. She had looked at the binder for exactly 10 seconds. Then she had closed it, handed it back to me, and said, "Do not waste your time on daydreams. Mia, you are going to pay your dues and stay in your lane. Treasurers hire experts. We are the ones who manage them." That was the day the analyst died and the compliant homeowner was born. I flipped through the pages, feeling a wave of grief for that woman who had just wanted to make something fair. And then, as I turned the page past a spreadsheet of landscaping costs, a loose sheet of paper fluttered out. It landed on the tile floor face up. It was a letter on thick official stationery. The letterhead was embossed in navy blue ink. Northridge Bank, Reserve Audit Department. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered Northridge. It was the only bank I had secretly contacted when I noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports. I had waited months for the reply, and when it finally came, Vivian had met me at the community center. Holding the envelope, she had told me with a look of pity that I now recognized as condescension, that the audit request had been denied. She said the board had reviewed it and found no issues. She said it was a kindness that I did not push because I would have embarrassed myself among the real experts. I picked up the letter. My hands were shaking. I read the first paragraph. "Dear Ms. Reynolds, we are writing to acknowledge your correspondence regarding the incoming reserve audit. While we are incredibly impressed with your documentation and are looking forward to conducting a full review as per bylaws section 14.2, we respect the board's decision to decline the trigger event at this time." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Decline. I had never declined. I had never even seen the approval letter. They had offered the audit. I had been right. I had been more than right. I had been whistleblower material. I felt a hot, prickly sensation spread across my scalp. I flipped the letter over. On the back, scrawled in blue ink, was a note. It was Vivian's handwriting. I would know those sharp, aggressive loops anywhere. Withdrawn per president request. Resident will be pursuing compliance degree instead. And below it, her signature, Vivian Hargrove. She had intercepted the audit request. She had written back to the bank pretending to be the full board, or at least acting on behalf of the neighborhood. And she had killed my transparency dream before I even knew it was alive. She had looked me in the eye and told me I was overreacting, all while holding the proof that I was correct. I felt sick. I felt a rage so cold it burned. This was not just controlling. This was malicious. She had not just steered me toward silence. She had actively sabotaged my escape route. I was about to close the binder, my mind reeling, when I noticed something else tucked into the back pocket. It was a small torn scrap of paper looking like it had been ripped from a legal pad. I pulled it out. It was not my handwriting. It was Vivian's again, but this time it was hurried, scribbled. It looked like a note she had written to herself while on a phone call. The kind of mindless doodling you do when you are listening to someone talk. There were just 2 lines. Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund. Audit only if major event triggers. I stared at the words. Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund. I had never heard it phrased that way. I knew the neighborhood had money. I knew there were investments, portfolios, special assessments. I analyzed finances for a living. I understood how reserves were structured. But a named trigger clause, specifically tied to major events, that usually implied something locked away, something substantial. But it was the second line that made the hair on my arm stand up. Audit only if major event triggers. I read it again. Audit only if major event triggers. I sat there on the floor of the file room, the silence of the building pressing in on me, and I tried to parse the sentence like a forensic accountant. Audit, an official inspection of the accounts, typically by an independent body. Audits happen when there is a discrepancy or when a specific event mandates a review of the books. Only if major event triggers. The word triggers was the key. In legal and financial terms, a trigger is an event that sets a clause into motion. My brain, finally waking up from the emotional coma of the last 24 hours, started connecting the dots. Why did Vivian push me into silence? Maybe so I would be useful to the HOA. Or maybe to keep me close, but definitely to keep me away from a career where I might be independent. Why did she despise Alex? She said he was common, but was that it? Or was it that Alex was smart? Alex was meticulous. Alex was the kind of man who read the fine print. And why cancel the reception now? Why wait until 3 weeks before the date? Because the reception was the trigger. If I hosted a major event, something would happen with this reserve fund. And according to this note, that something involved an audit. And an audit is the last thing you want if you have something to hide. I looked at the word fund on the scrap of paper. It sat there innocent and heavy. Fund. It is a funny word. It means money set aside for a purpose. But in my world, in the world of Oakwood Grove, it meant a legal entity used to hold resident dues for the benefit of the neighborhood. I realized in that moment, sitting in the dust of the file room, that I had been looking at the word wrong my whole life. I had spent 8 years trying to earn their trust. I had tried to be the trustworthy resident. I had tried to be the one they could believe in. But all this time, trust was not a feeling. It was a noun. It was a pile of money. And it was a pile of money that they were terrified I would find out about. I felt a sudden wave of clarity that was almost dizzying. Vivian Hargrove did not cancel the reception to save the HOA brand. She canceled it to stop the audit. She canceled it because if I hosted that event and triggered the clause, some banker somewhere was going to open a file, look at the numbers, and realize that the math did not add up. She was not protecting the neighborhood from a spectacle. She was protecting herself from a felony. I closed the binder, trapping the rejection letter and the scrap of paper inside. I held it against my chest. Felt heavy, heavier than paper and cardboard should feel. Felt like I was holding a weapon. I stood up. My knees cracked. I brushed the dust off my skirt. I looked around the file room one last time. The pristine white walls, the gleaming overhead lights, the portraits of past presidents staring down with arrogant disinterest. It was all a facade. This whole building, this whole neighborhood was a stage set designed to distract the audience from what was happening backstage. I walked out of the community center with the binder under my arm. I did not take the reception files. I did not take the vendor contracts. I took the evidence. On the drive back to my house, I kept thinking about that word fund. Vivian had taught me that community was something you gave to neighbors unconditionally. She had taught me that questioning the board was a betrayal. She had weaponized the concept of loyalty to keep me blind. But as I turned onto my street, accelerating past the speed limit, I realized the truth. There are two kinds of funds. There is the kind you feel in your heart, and there is the kind you sign on a document. They had broken the first one a long time ago, and the second one, the Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund, I had a feeling they had broken that one, too. And I was going to find out exactly how much it cost them to do it. That afternoon, the sky over Oakwood Grove finally opened up, letting loose a torrential downpour that hammered against the single window of my living room. It was the kind of rain that washes the neighborhood gray, turning the streets into slick mirror-like surfaces reflecting the brake lights of cars going nowhere. I was sitting on my couch, the green binder from the file room resting on my lap like a heavy stone tablet. When a knock rattled my front door, I knew it was Alex before I even opened it. He has a specific knock. 3 rapid taps followed by a pause, a rhythm he has used since our third date. When I pulled the door open, he was standing there soaked to the bone. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and water was dripping from the hem of his jacket onto my welcome mat. But I did not look at his face first. I looked at what he was holding. In his arms, clutched tight against his chest to shield it from the rain, was a large sodden cardboard box. It was one of those banker boxes we had used to organize our life together, usually reserved for tax returns or old photos, but I knew what was in this one. I stepped back to let him in. He did not say hello. He did not try to kiss me. He walked straight into the living room and set the box down on the coffee table with a heavy thud. The bottom was wet, leaving a dark ring on the wood, but neither of us moved to wipe it up. "If they are going to cancel the reception," Alex said, his voice rough, "then I want to see exactly what they touched." He stripped off his wet jacket and threw it over the back of a chair. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that I had not noticed 2 days ago. He looked like a man who had been trying to solve a complex coding error for 48 hours straight, only to realize the bug was in the hardware itself. "What is this?" I asked, nodding at the box. "The skeleton," he said. "I went to the community center after hours. I printed out everything, every email chain, every invoice, every contract stored in the shared drive. I called the vendors who would talk to me. This is the autopsy. Mia." He sat down on the floor, ignoring the couch, and gestured for me to join him. It was a challenge. He was telling me that we could not just sit around feeling the phantom limb pain of a severed future. We had to look at the wound. We needed to know the truth, not just feel the pain. I slid off the couch and sat opposite him. Between us lay the box, a cardboard tomb for a day that would never happen. We started unpacking it piece by piece. First came the catering contract. $10,000 deposit, non-refundable. The document listed the menu we had agonizingly chosen. Herb-crusted lamb, wild mushroom risotto. I saw my name printed clearly at the bottom. Client, Mia Reynolds. Next was the floral agreement with Lucia Events. $5,000. White hydrangeas and trailing ivy. Again, my name, Mia Reynolds. Then the band, the lighting technicians, the rental company for the tents. Every single piece of paper was a testament to the fact that this was my event, my liability, my dream. The HOA was listed only as financial approvers on a separate rider, meaning they held the purse strings of approval. But legally, I was the one on the hook. We worked in silence for 20 minutes. The only sound the rustling of paper and the rain beating against the glass. And then Alex pulled out a staple-bound document from the bottom of the stack. It was the contract for the backyard permit. It was the crown jewel. Securing it had felt like a miracle. Losing it felt like a tragedy. Alex flipped past the initial agreement, past the liability clauses to the very last page. He froze. Mia, he said, his voice quiet, dangerously calm. Look at this. He spun the document around and slid it across the table toward me. It was a page titled Cancellation and Release of Date Form. My eyes scanned the text. It stated that the resident was voluntarily releasing the date of October 14th, forfeiting the deposit of $15,000 and absolving the HOA of any further obligation. And at the bottom of the page was a signature. Mia Reynolds. I stared at it. The ink was black. The loops were large. Spelled my name, but it made my stomach turn over. That is not my signature, I whispered. Alex leaned forward, his eyes intense. I know. Look at the R in Reynolds. You write your R with a sharp loop at the top. This one is round. And look at the pressure marks. Whoever wrote this hesitated. See the little ink blot at the end of the A. They paused. They were thinking about how to shape the letter. I reached out and touched the paper. Felt cold. This is dated 3 weeks ago. September 2nd. September 2nd, Alex repeated. 3 weeks before Vivian called you into that Zoom meeting. I grabbed my phone. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I dialed the number for the HOA office. I did not care that it was 5 o'clock in the evening. I prayed someone was still in the office. On the third ring, a woman answered. Oakwood Grove, Events Department. This is Mia Reynolds, I said. My voice sounded strange, tight and high. I need to speak to the manager immediately. There was a pause. Ms. Reynolds. Oh, hello. I thought everything was settled with your account. I am looking at a cancellation form, I said, cutting her off. I need to know how you received this. The woman on the other line hesitated. I could hear her typing on a keyboard. One moment, let me pull up the file. Yes, here it is. We received the signed cancellation form via email on September 2nd at 2:15 in the afternoon. We followed up with a confirmation call at 2:30 to verify per our policy for cancellations within 90 days. You spoke to me? I asked. The room seemed to tilt. Well, yes, the woman said, sounding confused and a little defensive. I spoke to you, or well, I spoke to the resident. You confirmed the cancellation. You said you were facing some personal challenges and needed to release the date immediately to avoid the next installment payment. What did the voice sound like? I asked. I beg your pardon? The woman you spoke to? Pressed, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Did she sound like me? Did she sound like I sound right now? There was a long silence on the line. She sounded upset. She was crying a little. Her voice was lower than yours is now. Maybe, but she verified the last 4 digits of the social security number on file and the booking reference. We had no reason to doubt it. Send me the email, I said. Forward me the email that the form was attached to right now. Please. I can do that, she said, her tone cooling. She sensed trouble. Send it to the email on file. No, I said. Read me the email address it came from. It was sent from, let me see, mia.reynolds@oakwoodgrovehome.com. I felt the blood drain from my face. I lowered the phone slowly, not even bothering to say goodbye, and pressed the end call button. What is it? Alex asked. The email, I said, looking up at him. It came from mia.reynolds@oakwoodgrovehome.com. Alex frowned. I have never seen you use that address. Is that an old account? It is not mine, I said. It is the neighborhood admin account. I stood up and walked to the window, needing to look away from the papers. Vivian, in her obsession with organization and control, had set up a private domain for the HOA 10 years ago. oakwoodgrovehome.com. It was used for paying bills, scheduling maintenance, communicating with vendors. Each resident had an alias routed to the main server, which Vivian controlled. I had not logged into that system since I moved in. I had assumed my alias was deactivated. Apparently, it had been kept active for exactly this kind of utility. They used the internal HOA server, I said, turning back to Alex, because they knew I would never see the sent folder. Vivian manages that domain personally. I looked at the date again. September 2nd. Alex, I said, my mind racing. Do you have the call logs? You said you pulled everything. I pulled our logs, Alex said, reaching into the box. But I also pulled the HOA plan data. You are still on their shared system. Mia, you never opted out. He pulled out a thick stack of spreadsheets. He was an engineer. Of course, he had the raw data. He flipped through the pages, his finger tracing the lines of timestamps and durations. September 2nd, he muttered. Around 2:30 in the afternoon. He stopped. His finger hovered over a line item. Here, he said. Outgoing call. Duration 15 minutes. Destination. HOA Events Office. Whose line? I asked. I felt like I was going to throw up. Alex looked up at me. His face was grim. It was not Vivian's line. It was Brooke's. The room fell silent. The only sound was the rain drumming against the glass. Louder now, like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Brooke, the president's daughter, the one who had sat in the Zoom call looking bored, the one who had said, better luck next time. I closed my eyes and reconstructed the timeline. September 2nd. That was a Tuesday. Vivian had texted me at 3 o'clock that day, asking if I was free the following weekend. It had seemed like a casual check-in, but at 2 o'clock, an hour before she texted me, she had already instructed someone to email the cancellation form. And at 2:30, Brooke had picked up the phone, dialed the office, and pretended to be me. She had probably put on a sad, shaky voice. She had verified my social security number, which she knew because the board kept all our documents in the safe. She had canceled my reception while sitting in her bedroom, probably checking her Instagram feed at the same time. It was coordinated. It was a tactical strike. I walked back to the table and picked up the cancellation form. I reached into my purse and pulled out my driver's license. I placed it on the table next to the forgery. We looked at them side by side. My real signature is fluid. It is the signature of someone who signs a lot of documents for work. It is fast, efficient, with a distinctive slant to the right. The signature on the form was careful. It was drawn, not written. The lines were shaky, as if the hand holding the pen was moving slowly, trying to mimic a shape rather than express a name. The pressure was uneven. It was a bad copy. To a stranger, it might pass. But to anyone who knew me, or to anyone looking closely, it was obviously fake. That is a forgery, Alex said. He did not say it like a question. He stated it like a fact. They faked my signature, I said, the words tasting metallic in my mouth. They impersonated me on the phone. They used a private email server to hide the paper trail. This is not a misunderstanding, Alex said. He stood up and walked around the table to stand next to me. He did not touch me, but his presence was a solid wall of heat at my back. A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite a neighbor. A misunderstanding is arguing about the mulch color. This is fraud. This is identity theft. I looked at the papers. I looked at the evidence of the board's betrayal. It was not just that they wanted to stop the reception. It was the lengths they had gone to. They had committed crimes. They had involved Brooke in a conspiracy. They had looked at me, smiled at me, and lied to my face for 3 weeks while the date was already released to someone else. Why? I asked, though I knew the answer. Why go this far? Why not just tell me they were cutting approval? Because if they told you, Alex said, his voice low, you might have found a way to host it yourself. Or we might have eloped. Or we might have kept the date and downsized. They needed the date canceled. They needed the contract voided. They needed the event to cease to exist. He was right. If they had just pulled the approval, I would have fought. I would have taken out a loan. I would have married him in a park. But by canceling the permit behind my back, by releasing the date, they ensured that the reception could not happen on the timeline that triggered the audit. They had not just cut the permission, they had scorched the earth. Alex reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm. Mia, listen to me. I looked up at him. His eyes were clear, focused. The exhaustion was still there, but behind it was a steel resolve I had never seen before. I know a lawyer, he said. Her name is Harper Quinn. We went to college together. She is not a corporate shark. She specializes in civil litigation. She handles messy situations. People usually hire her when things go wrong with business partners, but she knows HOA law too. I pulled back slightly. A lawyer? Alex, are you saying we should sue the HOA? I am saying we need advice, Alex said firmly. I am saying that Vivian just committed a felony to stop you from hosting your reception. I am saying that they forged your name on a legal contract. This is not about revenge. Mia, this is about protection. If they are willing to do this, what else have they signed your name to? What else have they done with your identity? The question hung in the air. What else? I thought about the green binder. I thought about the audit request I had never seen. I thought about the reserve fund. If they could forge my signature to end my happiness, could they forge it to steal my dues? Could they forge it to take control of the reserve assets? The answer was sitting right there on the coffee table in black ink. Call her, I said. Alex nodded. He did not smile. He just pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. I am not doing this to hurt them, I said mostly to myself, staring at the fake signature that looked so much like mine and yet nothing like me. I know, Alex said, bringing the phone to his ear. You are doing this to stop them from hurting you. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the roof like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. The weeks that followed were measured not in hours, but in the steady accumulation of paper. Harper Quinn was a machine. She was methodical, ruthless, and terrifyingly efficient. She fired off subpoenas like artillery shells, demanding call logs from the HOA office, email metadata from the server hosting company, and 10 years of transaction history from Northridge Bank. Then came the day she slapped a thick file onto her desk in front of me. On the cover sheet in bold capitalized letters were the words Reynolds v. Wagut Group Hoa. I stared at it. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. Hot and acidic. It looked wrong. It looked unnatural. Names are supposed to bind neighbors together, not stand on opposite sides of a legal versus sign. Seeing my name pitted against the people who were supposed to protect my property values felt like looking at a broken bone protruding through the skin. A violation of the body's natural order. We filed this morning, Harper said, her voice cutting through my hesitation. The clock is ticking now. They have 30 days to respond. News in Oakwood Grove travels faster than light. By the time I got back to my house, my phone was lighting up with notifications from people I had not spoken to since the last block party. Vivian was already ahead of the narrative. She was playing the victim with Oscar-worthy dedication. The story circulating at the community pool and the neighborhood Facebook group was that poor Mia was having a mental breakdown. The story was that Alex was a manipulative outsider who was isolating me from my loving HOA and forcing me to sue them for money I did not deserve. I walked into the local grocery store to buy milk and Mrs. Higgins, Vivian's bridge partner, looked right through me as if I were a ghost. I realized then that Vivian was not just fighting a legal battle. She was fighting a war for social survival. She was willing to burn my reputation to the ground to keep hers pristine. But the real attack did not come for me. Came for Alex. It was a Tuesday evening. Alex was in the kitchen of our house making pasta. He had been quiet all evening, his shoulders tense. His phone rang a blocked number. He looked at it, hesitated, and then let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. He picked it up. I watched him from the living room. I saw his face go slack. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the countertop. He didn't say much, just a series of yes and I understand. When he hung up, he stood there for a long time staring at the dark window. Who was that? I asked. He turned around. He looked pale. Wrong number, he said. I knew he was lying. Alex is a terrible liar. He is too honest for his own good, but I was too tired to push him. I went to bed early, leaving him sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of water he didn't drink. The next evening, he came home early from work. He was holding a manila envelope. He looked like he hadn't slept. He walked into the living room where I was organizing the latest batch of discovery documents Harper had sent over and dropped the envelope on top of my pile. I need to tell you something, he said. His voice was rough. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printed email. It was a job offer, or rather an invitation to interview for a senior engineer position at one of the largest tech firms in the state. It was the kind of job Alex had dreamed about since college. The salary listed was nearly double what he made now. This is amazing, I said, confused. Why do you look like you are at a funeral? Look at the sender, Alex said. I looked. The email was from a recruitment firm called Vantage Point Executive Search. I do not understand, I said. The head of Vantage Point is on the board of directors for Charles Hargrove's development company, Alex said. And last night, a man called me. He didn't give his name. He told me that I am a bright young man with a promising future. He told me that it would be a shame if personal entanglements made me unhireable in this city. He said that if I could help my fiancée see reason and drop this unfortunate lawsuit, opportunities would open up for me. He said if I didn't, doors would close. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Alex and for one terrifying, heartbreaking second, I doubted him. I looked at the offer. It was a golden ticket. It was stability. It was everything a man in his position would want. And I thought of Charles. I thought of how Charles Hargrove had sold his spine piece by piece for years in exchange for comfort and peace. I thought, this is it. This is where he leaves me. This is where the price gets too high. So, I said, my voice trembling, are you going to take it? Alex looked at me. He saw the doubt in my eyes. He saw the fear that I was about to be abandoned again. He reached out and took the paper from my hand. Mia, he said. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he tore the letter in half. Then, he tore the halves in quarters. He crumpled the pieces into a ball and threw them into the trash can by the desk. I do not want a career that is built on selling you out, he said. His voice was steady, filled with a quiet rage I had never seen before. I do not want their money. I do not want their favors. And I am not going to let them threaten me. He walked over and knelt in front of my chair, taking my hands in his. They think everyone has a price because they have a price. They do not understand that some things are not for sale. I burst into tears. I cried because I was relieved, but mostly I cried because I realized how damaged I was. I had expected him to fail me. I had been trained to expect betrayal. Alex holding firm was the first time in my life a man had stood between me and the Hargrove machine and refused to move. The next week, the depositions began. Harper prepared me for 2 days straight. We sat in her office drinking lukewarm coffee while she drilled me. They will try to make you emotional, she warned. They will ask about your history in the neighborhood. They will ask if you love the HOA. They will try to paint you as an ungrateful resident who is lashing out because she is stressed about a wedding. Do not apologize. Do not explain. Answer yes or no. Stick to the facts. The facts are our friends. Your feelings are their ammunition. The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room at the opposing counsel's firm. It was sterile and cold. Vivian sat at the far end of the long table, flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored blazer, her hair perfectly coiffed. She smiled at me when I walked in.
Assad.
Pitying smile that made me want to scream. But I didn't scream. I sat down. I put my hands on the table. And I remembered Harper's rule. No apologies. Vivian went first. Under oath with a videographer recording every twitch. She played the role of the martyr beautifully. When Harper asked about the reception cancellation,
Vivian sighed.
I was worried about Mia, she said, her voice soft. She was spiraling. The planning was becoming obsessive. I thought she needed a break. I did it to protect her mental health. By forging her signature, Harper asked, sliding the document across the table. I signed it as her proxy, Vivian said smoothly. In our community, we often handle administrative tasks for each other. It was not malicious. It was efficient. And the phone call where your daughter Brooke impersonated Mia, Harper pressed. I cannot speak to that, Vivian said, taking a sip of water. If Brooke made a call, she was likely just trying to help execute the decision I made as president. She was unbreakable. She had an answer for everything. She spun every theft into a community investment, every lie into protection. Then Harper pulled out the big guns. Mrs. Hargrove, Harper said, are you aware of the clause in the 2015 Oakwood Grove bylaws regarding the reserve audit? Vivian's hand froze halfway to her water glass. I am aware of the bylaws generally. Are you aware? Harper continued, reading from the document, that upon the hosting of a major event by any resident, the bank is required to conduct a full forensic audit of all transactions over the preceding 10 years. Vivian stared at Harper. The warmth evaporated from her eyes. I believe there is some boilerplate language to that effect. And are you aware, Harper said, looking up, that on September 2nd, the same day you ordered the cancellation of the reception, the reserve balance was $1.4 million lower than the projected value based on market performance. Vivian did not answer. Her jaw tightened. Did you cancel the reception to prevent the bank from discovering that missing $1.4 million? Harper asked. Objection, Vivian's lawyer barked. Speculation. I am asking for the witness's state of mind, Harper said calmly. Did you know about the audit? Yes, Vivian whispered. It was the first time she sounded small. Next was Brooke. The president's daughter did not have Vivian's iron coating. She crumbled within 20 minutes. She sat in the chair looking like a terrified teenager, picking at her cuticles. When Harper showed her the email logs from the HOA admin account, Brooke started to cry. I just did what Mom told me, she sobbed. She said Mia was making a mistake. She said the reception would ruin us. I didn't know it was illegal to make the call. I just wanted everyone to stop fighting. Did you know your studio was funded with reserve money? Harper asked. Mom said it was community money, Brooke wailed. She said we have a neighborhood pot. She said Mia had a job and Alex, so she didn't need the help. She said I needed the help. Did you ever ask if Mia had approved this transfer? Harper asked. I asked, Brooke wailed. I sent an email asking if we should tell Mia. And Mom said to call it community fund in the books so Mia would never know. So you knew it was a secret? Harper said. I trusted my mother, Brooke screamed. It was a sound of pure anguish. I thought she was protecting us. Her admission hung in the air like smoke. She had just testified against her own mother. The defense table looked like a funeral. Then, it was Charles's turn. Charles Hargrove walked to the stand like a man marching to the gallows. He looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. Mr. Hargrove, Harper said, you are a co-trustee. You signed the authorization for a $50,000 withdrawal last year for home improvements. Did you ask Mia for permission? No, Charles whispered. Speak up, please, the judge ordered. No, Charles said, his voice cracking. I did not. Why? Harper asked. You knew the terms of the bylaws. You knew it required resident notification. Charles looked at Vivian. For the first time in my life, I saw him look at her not with adoration but with fear and resentment. Because Vivian told me to sign it, he said. She said if I didn't sign it, the neighborhood would go under. She said she would leave me if I didn't fix the cash flow problem. So you stole from your neighbors to save your marriage? Harper said. It wasn't a question. I thought I could put it back, Charles wept. I always thought I could put it back. He was not a villain. He was just a coward. But in that moment, I realized that a coward is just as dangerous as a villain because they let the villain in the door. Finally, they called Vivian back to the stand. She had regained some of her composure. She adjusted her pearls. She looked at me with cold, hard eyes. Mrs. Hargrove, Harper said, we have seen the emails. We have heard the audio. We have seen the bank statements showing funds going into your personal account. How do you explain this? Vivian lifted her chin. I am the president of this neighborhood, she said. Her voice was crisp. It was not the voice of a leader. It was the voice of a manager addressing shareholders. I made executive decisions. I reallocated assets to ensure the survival of the Oakwood Grove brand. If the ship is sinking, you do not ask the passengers for permission to use the lifeboats. You act. Your residents are not passengers, Harper said, leaning in. They are the owners of the boat and you stole it. I built this community, Vivian snapped. I gave it life. I gave it that reputation. Anything they have is because of me. If I need to use the money to keep the roofs over our heads, that is my right. It is not your right, Harper said. It is a felony. If Mia actually loved this neighborhood, Vivian sneered, looking directly at me, she would understand. She would not be dragging us through the mud for the world to see. She is selfish. She has always been selfish. The courtroom gasped. I sat there and I felt a strange sense of peace. There it was, the truth. She didn't see me as a resident. She saw me as an asset. She saw me as a resource to be mined. And when I tried to leave, she saw me as a liability to be liquidated. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood from my spectacle. She was protecting her supply. Harper sat down. No further questions. Your Honor, the judge, a stern woman with gray hair and glasses, looked over her spectacles at the Hargroves. She looked at the weeping daughter, the broken husband, and the defiant president. She cleared her throat. I have heard enough, the judge said. The evidence presented today is overwhelming. The documentation of the bylaws is clear. The evidence of misappropriation is clear. And the evidence of fraud regarding the cancellation of the reception is frankly disturbing. She banged her gavel once. I am issuing an immediate temporary injunction. All accounts associated with the Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund are frozen effective immediately. Furthermore, I am freezing the personal assets of Vivian and Charles Hargrove, pending a full independent forensic audit to determine the total extent of the liability. She looked at Vivian. Mrs. Hargrove, you are removed as president effective immediately. You are barred from accessing any neighborhood accounts until this court determines how much you owe your residents. You cannot do that. Vivian stood up, her voice shrill. We have bills. We have appearances. Sit down, madam, the judge ordered, or I will hold you in contempt. You should be grateful I am not referring this to the district attorney for criminal charges this afternoon, though that may yet come. The gavel banged again. A final decisive sound. Court is adjourned. The room erupted. The press rushed toward the railing. Charles put his head on the table. Brooke was being comforted by a paralegal. But I just sat there. I looked at the screen where the numbers were still projected. The numbers that represented the residents' dues and the Hargroves' betrayal. The coffin was closed on the Oakwood Grove reputation. The judge had just nailed the lid shut. I stood up. Harper put a hand on my shoulder. Alex squeezed my hand. "It is done," Alex said. "Not yet," I said, looking at Vivian, who was arguing frantically with her lawyer. "They are frozen, but they are not finished. Now comes the audit." The period that followed the temporary injunction was not the victory lap I had imagined. It was a waiting game, and it was excruciating. For 6 weeks, the assets of the Hargrove family and the HOA were frozen in a block of legal ice. A team of forensic accountants appointed by the court descended on the financial records like vultures on a carcass. I spent those weeks in a state of suspended animation. I went to work.
I stared at spreadsheets for clients.
And then I came home and stared at the wall. Every time my phone pinged with an email from Harper, my heart would hammer against my ribs. I was terrified that they would find a loophole. I was terrified that Vivian, with her infinite capacity for manipulation, would find a way to charm the auditors or fabricate a document that exonerated her. But numbers, unlike presidents, do not lie. The final report arrived on a gray Tuesday in December. Harper called me into her office to review it before the final hearing. She placed a thick spiral-bound document on the desk. It was heavy, felt like a brick. "It is worse than we thought," Harper said, her face grim. I opened the report. The executive summary was a catalog of betrayal. The accountants found that over the course of 11 years, more than 55% of the principal balance of the Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund had been withdrawn. That is over $1,200,000. There were no consent forms. There were no signatures from residents. There was no paper trail proving that anyone had authorized a single cent of it. The money had not gone to neighborhood repairs. It had not gone to community events. It had gone to lifestyle maintenance. It had gone to prop up Charles's failing development company, which was bleeding money due to mismanagement. It had gone to completely remodel the Hargrove mansion because Vivian decided the old decor was bad for her energy. It had gone to Brooke's studio rent, her inventory, and even her personal credit card bills. Every luxury I had watched them enjoy. Every party they threw to impress the neighbors. Every vacation where they posted photos of themselves looking like royalty. It was all paid for by the dues we had all paid to ensure the neighborhood would be safe. Harper filed the report with the court the next morning. Her motion was aggressive. She asked for 3 things. First, the permanent removal of Vivian and Charles Hargrove as trustees. Second, the immediate transfer of all remaining assets to resident control. And third, a judgment requiring the Hargroves to repay every single dollar they had misappropriated, even if it meant liquidating their personal assets to do it. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 days before Christmas. The courtroom felt different this time. The air was thinner. The bravado was gone. When I looked at the defense table, I almost didn't recognize Vivian. Vivian Hargrove, the woman who would not be caught dead without perfect hair in a tailored blazer, looked frayed. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, messy bun, and strands were escaping around her face. Her makeup was applied with a heavy hand, but it could not hide the gray exhaustion in her skin. She looked like a building that had been condemned, but was still refusing to fall down. Charles sat next to her, staring at the table. He looked smaller, as if he were shrinking inside his expensive suit. Brooke was not there. Her lawyer was present to represent her interests, but she had chosen to stay away. I did not blame her. Harper presented the findings with the clinical precision of a surgeon. She walked the judge through the timeline. In 2018, Harper said, pointing to a graph on the screen, a withdrawal of $80,000 was made. The memo says community emergency, but the cross-reference with credit card statements shows that same week a charge of $80,000 was made to a luxury travel agency for a tour of the Mediterranean. The judge, the same stern woman from the first hearing, narrowed her eyes. She looked at the Hargroves. Mr. Sterling, the judge addressed their lawyer. Do you dispute these findings? Your Honor, Mr. Sterling said, standing up. He sounded tired. My clients do not dispute the transactions. However, they maintained that the intent was never malicious. They viewed the neighborhood finances as a single ecosystem. They believed that by maintaining the community status, they were ultimately benefiting the residents. By spending their money on a cruise, the judge asked dryly. By maintaining the social standing that allows the neighborhood to do business, Mr. Sterling argued weakly. Then Vivian stood up. Mr. Sterling tried to grab her arm to stop her, but she shook him off. She walked to the podium. She gripped the wood with white knuckles. Everything I did, she said, her voice trembling. I did for them. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but they were pleading. Mia, look at me. We kept the neighborhood for you. We kept the brand for you. We wanted you to have a legacy to come home to. I am your president. I love this community. I would never hurt you. 6 months ago, that speech would have worked. 6 months ago, I would have felt the guilt clawing at my throat. I would have felt like the ungrateful resident she always said I was. But today, I looked at the screen. I looked at the numbers. $1,200,000. Your Honor, Vivian continued, I admit we were creative with the accounting. I admit we cut corners. But you cannot punish leaders for trying to keep a roof over their residents' heads. The judge let the silence stretch out. It was uncomfortable. It was heavy. Mrs. Hargrove, the judge said finally. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. Love is not a legal defense for embezzlement. Love does not grant you the right to forge a signature. Love does not allow you to impersonate a resident to cancel her reception because you are afraid of getting caught. The judge leaned forward. You speak of legacy, but the only legacy you have left these residents is a crime scene. The law does not operate on sentiment, Mrs. Hargrove. It operates on facts. And the facts are that you stole from the very people you were sworn to protect. Vivian flinched as if she had been slapped. She stood there, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The perfect president narrative had finally collided with a wall she could not climb. The judge looked down at her papers. It is the judgment of this court, she began, that Vivian and Charles Hargrove have committed a gross breach of fiduciary duty. She read the verdict rapidly. First, the fund. I was granted immediate sole oversight of the Oakwood Grove Reserve Fund. The Hargroves were permanently barred from accessing, managing, or even viewing the accounts. Second, restitution. The court ordered Vivian and Charles Hargrove to repay the sum of $1,240,000 to the fund within 24 months. To secure this debt, the court placed a lien on the Hargrove mansion and Charles's remaining business assets if they could not pay. The house, the museum, the stage, the pride of Vivian's life would be sold to satisfy the judgment. Third, Brooke, because she was a beneficiary of the stolen funds, but not a trustee, she was not held criminally liable. However, the judge ruled that the $300,000 invested in her studio was an unjust enrichment. Brooke would have to sign a promissory note to the fund, repaying the principal over 10 years. Then the judge paused. She looked at the file regarding the forged cancellation form and the impersonation. Regarding the matter of the forged signature and the fraudulent communication with the HOA office, the judge said, this court finds that the actions of Vivian Hargrove constitute criminal fraud and identity theft. The room went dead silent. Vivian grabbed the podium. This is a civil trial, the judge said. However, Given the severity of the evidence, I am prepared to refer this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Mrs. Hargrove could face charges for forgery in the second degree and criminal impersonation. Harper leaned over to me. Her voice was a whisper in my ear. This is it. Mia, she said. It is up to you. The judge is signaling that she will only forward the referral if the victim wants to pursue it. You have the right to press charges. You can send her to jail. I looked at Vivian. She was staring at me. Her face was stripped of all its power. She looked terrified. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me like an asset or a disappointment. She was looking at me like I was the only person in the world who could save her. I looked at Charles. He had his face buried in his hands. I thought about the orange jumpsuit. I thought about the handcuffs. I thought about the trial that would drag on for another year, the cameras, the scandal, and then I thought about the silence of a jail cell versus the silence of an empty mansion they could no longer afford. I stood up. Your Honor, I said. My voice was steady. I did not shake. Ms. Reynolds, the judge asked, do you wish to make a statement regarding the criminal referral? I do, I said. I looked straight at Vivian. I held her gaze until she blinked. I do not want to see Mrs. Hargrove in prison, I said. I heard Charles let out a sob of relief. Vivian's shoulders sagged. Prison is too easy, I continued. Vivian's head snapped up. If she goes to prison, I said, she gets to be a martyr. She gets to tell everyone she sacrificed herself for the community. She gets to be the tragic victim of a cruel system. I took a breath. The real punishment for people like the Hargroves is not a cage. It is irrelevance. It is living in a world where their money can no longer cover up who they really are. It is watching me walk out of this room and knowing they can never control me again. It is knowing that they have to sell their furniture to pay us back. It is knowing that they have lost the only thing that actually mattered to them, their image. I turned back to the judge. Restoring the fund is enough for me, Your Honor. I do not need the state to punish them. I am going to let them punish themselves by living with the truth. The judge looked at me for a long moment. There was a flicker of respect in her eyes. Very well, she said. The court accepts the plaintiff's position. The criminal referral is withheld provided the defendants comply strictly with the restitution schedule. But let me be clear. She pointed her gavel at Vivian. This is a mercy you do not deserve. If you miss one payment, if you violate one order, I will reopen this file and I will sign the warrant myself. Understood, Vivian whispered. Case closed, the judge said. She banged the gavel. It was over. I turned to Harper and hugged her. It wasn't a polite hug. It was a desperate, bone-crushing embrace. Then I turned to Alex. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into his chest and held me there while the courtroom emptied out. Let's go, I said. We walked out of the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. The hallway was lined with reporters. As soon as they saw me, the shouting started. Mia, did you really refuse to send the president to jail? Mia, are you going to evict the Hargroves? Mrs. Hargrove, is it true the mansion is for sale? The camera flashes were blinding, popping like strobes in a nightclub, but I didn't stop. I didn't answer. I didn't put my hand up to shield my face. I walked through the gauntlet of noise. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the courthouse and stepped out onto the steps. It was cold. A sharp, biting wind was blowing through the streets of our town. It whipped my hair across my face. It stung my cheeks. But it felt good. It didn't feel like the warm breeze of a fairy tale ending. Felt like a storm. Felt like the air was scrubbing me clean. It was the wind of a person who had just walked out of a circus tent, leaving the stale smell of popcorn and sawdust behind and stepped into the real world. I walked down the steps to where my car was waiting. Alex opened the door for me. I slid into the passenger seat. I pulled the door shut, muffling the sound of the shouting reporters. My phone, which I had silenced during the hearing, began to buzz against my thigh. I pulled it out. Incoming call, President Hargrove. Incoming call, Charles. Incoming call, Brooke. They were calling. Of course they were calling. They wanted to thank me. They wanted to explain. They wanted to spin the narrative one last time. They wanted to gaslight me into believing that my mercy was actually their victory. I looked at the screen. I looked at the names that had defined my existence for 8 years. I didn't answer. I opened my messaging app. I created a new group chat with all 3 of them. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I thought about writing a paragraph. I thought about telling them I loved the neighborhood, but I couldn't know them anymore. I thought about explaining why I did what I did. But then I remembered the hook. I remembered the line that started it all. The HOA board will not approve this spectacle. I typed 6 words. The circus is already full. I hit send. Then I went to the settings menu. I selected block contact for Vivian Hargrove. Then for Charles Hargrove. Then for Brooke Hargrove. I put the phone down on the center console. The screen went black. I looked over at Alex. He was watching me, his hand on the gear shift. Where to? He asked. Anywhere, I said. Just drive. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the courthouse and the reporters and the ruins of the Hargrove dynasty in the rearview mirror, I took a deep breath. I was broke until the restitution checks started coming. I was an outcast by choice. I was the scandal of the town. But for the first time in my life, the person sitting in this seat was actually me. The video cuts back to the present day. I am sitting in my house. The lamp is still casting that warm yellow glow. The pile of reception invitations is gone from the table. The engagement ring is back on my finger. Catching the light, I lean forward into the camera lens. My expression is not angry. It is calm. It is the calm of someone who has survived the fire. They told me they would not approve the spectacle of my life. I say to you, they thought that by cutting the strings I would collapse. But what they did not realize is that I was never the puppet. I was the puppeteer waiting for my moment. I pick up the green binder, the one I recovered from the file room, and hold it up. It turns out the thing I needed was not their approval. It was not their rules. It was the courage to take the scissors and cut the cords that tied me to their stage. I did not need them to build my life. I just needed them to get out of the way. I smile, and this time it reaches my eyes. The circus is closed, guys, but the show, my show, it is just getting started, and this time I am the one writing the script. Thank you so much for watching my story. I know it was heavy, and I know neighborhoods are complicated, but I hope it reminded you that you have the right to protect your peace even if it costs you your HOA standing. I want to know where you are listening from. Are you in the car? Are you cooking dinner? Are you hiding in the bathroom from your own chaotic neighborhood? Drop a comment below with your location and say hi. I read every single one. And please, if you want to support survivors of toxic HOAs and hear more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the HOA Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to help the algorithm find us. And if you are feeling extra supportive, smash that hype button so this story gets heard by the people who really need to know they are not alone.